Hello everyone and welcome back to the Magnus Invitational. We are continuing with the match Fabiano Caruana versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Fabiano is currently in the top 4, so he is in the playoffs, but he still needs to remain in the top 4. And Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, he needs to beat Fabiano and also win the next match to qualify for the top 4 in this tournament to go into the knockout stage of the tournament. And of course Fabi will try everything he can to prevent that. So in game 1, Fabi with the white pieces opens with d4, and Maxime still sticks to his Slav with d4, d5, c4, and c6. So the Slav defense is on the board. He probably said, okay, this is an online tournament. Yes, it is a pretty big deal. There's a lot of money involved, and you know these are the absolute top elite players in the world. But if I don't experiment now, when am I going to do so? So he sticks with the Slav. We have knight to f3 and knight to f6. We have e3 by Fabi and bishop to f5. Again, preparing to close the cage with e6. We have knight to c3 and e6 now. And knight to h4, going after the bishop. We have bishop to e4 and now f3, pushing back the bishop all the way to g6. And now queen b3, going after the b7 pawn. You can always capture on g6. So queen c7, Maxime defends, and the bishop to d2 now. Fabi continues development, Maxime does the same, bishop e7, prepares castles, and c captures on d5. So a trade in the center, captures, and only now Fabi captures on g6. We have knight captures, h captures, and a queenside castle by Fabi. We have a6, not allowing knight to b5 for white, also preparing b5 in the future as white did castle queenside, so you might want to start attacking there. And king to b1, now just unpinning, the knight can now move. And knight to c6. And here rook to c1 now, x-raying that queen on c7, and rook to b8 now. And this position has been reached, and most often played moves are knight to a4 and g3 here, but the move Fabi played bishop to d3 is a new move, so already as of move 15 we have a completely new game. The h2 pawn is obviously free for grabs, so Maxime goes for it. We have rook captures on h2, but now it's Fabi who has the open h file just to use for his attacks, as the rook has already been played on b8, so black cannot castle, and you might have some problems there. But Maxime very confident that he will be able to do this. We have knight to e2, and now already there might be some threats involved. For example, if the queen moves somewhere, then maybe rook captures on c6 followed by queen captures here is an idea. So you constantly have to keep an eye on ideas like captures and maybe closing up the queen with the g3. So to make sure nothing like that happens, Maxime just trades rook captures on h1. We have rook captures, and now just b5. And you now will have to worry about rook to h8 at some point, but for the moment it's not a problem. So first Fabi just strikes in the center with e4, and now comes queen to b6, putting pressure on the d4 pawn. But now queen to d1 by Fabi, saying that okay, there's a nice juicy d4 pawn for you, but if Maxime actually went for the pawn, then you get rook h8 check, and now there's a problem because you either start giving material. If you block with the bishop, then bishop b4 is deadly. If you block with the knight, you of course lose it, and if king here, then you just capture here, and after queen captures, it's then a free knight. So of course Maxime doesn't grab the pawn. We have knight to b4, now offers a trade of bishops, and bishop captures on b4. We have bishop captures on b4, and now comes e5. I meant to say offers a trade for bishop for a knight. So e5, pushing back the knight, and knight to d7 now. We have f4, strengthening that center, and knight to f8 now will be useful guarding against that rook to h8 idea. And here Fabi goes for g4. At some point he wants to bust open the position with f5, and bishop back to e7 now. We have knight to g3 with more support for f5, and now rook to c8. Now Maxime will shift the attention of the rook and the queen, hopefully, to the c file. We have rook to h8, now not allowing this knight to move, and now king to d8. Here Maxime will try and shift his king over to the queen side. We have bishop to c2. And now comes f5, not allowing white to push f5. Maxime does it himself. So e captures on f6 en passant. We have g captures on f6, and now bishop captures on g6. So winning back his pawn. And the knight, of course, cannot capture as it's pinned. So king to c7. Now there is the threat of knight captures. So bishop back to c2. And now comes king to b8. now the king is nicely put away on the queen side, very safe there, and knight to e2 now, again with some defense of the d4 and f4 pawns, and you can also shift the knight to c3 if needed. So queen to c7, now if the queen moves, you will have a lot of pressure here on the c2 bishop, and Fabi opens up the position with a4. And here Maxime decides to capture it. b4 also is perhaps possible, but he doesn't go for it. Then perhaps a6 will be weak after the queen comes to d3. So he decides to capture it, and after bishop captures, he goes for knight to d7. Now he offers a trade of rooks, and Fabi declines with rook to h7, now putting pressure on the bishop. We have knight to b6 now, going after the bishop here, and now bishop back to b3, and queen to d6 now. So the bishop is nicely defended. We have queen to d3, Fabi goes after the a6 pawn, and now knight to c4. Now, basically, Maxime says, I either have a beautiful outpost for my knight here, or you have to trade your bishop for knight here, which Fabi does. He doesn't appreciate this knight being here, and now rook captures on c4, again blocking the queen's attack of the a6 pawn, but okay, the black queen defends it for the moment. We have queen to e3, and now with ideas of f5, and then there would be some dangers about capturing the bishop on e7. So rook to c7, defending the bishop, and now comes knight to c3, bringing the knight into the game. We have rook to b7 now, shifting the attack over to the b pawn, and here Fabi goes for f5. And this is where things really start to get interesting. Here Maxime has the option of going queen b4, put some pressure on the b2 pawn, so maybe this would force Fabi to go back with the rook. Or he can do e captures on f5, which he did in the game. Fabi recaptured, and now bishop to d8. He decided to offer a trade of rooks. And now getting his queen to b4 and going for this attack is probably a bit better than going for this trade, because after Fabi captured, the king captures and knight a4, the knight appears to be better than the bishop. The knight will have a nice outpost here on c5, and well, it's just not clear how black will attack the white king, whereas white has some very clear ideas on how you will attack. If you try and prevent it with something like bishop here, then it's possible, but then the queen comes here, and you might have some issues here. The white king will improve his position very quickly, and it might be a completely lost king opponent game for black. So instead, king to a7, getting out of any checks, but now queen to e8, and it's again very hard to find a move. Bishop to c7, but now knight to c5, and again it's black to move, but there simply aren't all that many moves. For example, if you try just to waste a move, queen f7 wins the game. Now you either go to a8 and you get mated, queen b7 mate, or after, let's say, something like queen to f7, you go bishop to c7, but then it's just knight to e6 with a double attack here and here, as the knight now blocks the queen's defense of the pawn here. So once you defend, queen captures here, gets a pass pawn, and of course a completely winning game. So after knight c5, Maxime tried a different idea. He has to make a move, although it's very hard to find one. Bishop to d8 would still be playable. However, Maxime played queen to f4. He decided to go for some counter-attacking ideas. Now the pawn is under attack. You might have to worry about queen to f1 check. The d4 pawn is under attack. However, this loses the game completely. And feel free to pause the video and find out how Fabi found it, or may not have found it, but you find it while you pause the video. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that there is a mate threat on b7, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's queen to c8. Now stopping queen captures on f5 with check, but also threatening queen b7 mate. And here the bishop and queen are, well, basically on dark squares. You cannot reach b7, doesn't matter how hard you try. So here Maxime tried queen to f1 check, we have king to a2, and now queen to c4 check. Fabi just played king to a3, and now the problem is that the d3 square is covered by the knight, so there is no check here, and the only other way to defend it would be to go to b5. But it was in this position on move 47 that Maxime resigned the game, and game 1 of their match goes to Fabi. So here only way to defend is queen b5 to defend mate, but then queen captures on c7 check, you're down a piece, and of course black is completely lost. So yeah, really a wild game. Maxime is still sticking to his Slav, and he's now down 1 point, and if he doesn't get back into the match and beat Fabi, he is not coming to playoffs, and he will be out of the tournament. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to once again thank Abdul Mohsin Al-Raji, Karsten Kurze, Stephen Atkinson, Chris Antley, and Martin Fischer for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Magnus Invitational until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And I will be announcing the first guest of my podcast very soon. See you soon, guys.